Tonight we're going to continue in the introduction to the book of Revelation. And again, I'll tell you why we're going to do that. I'll be repeating just a little bit of what I said last week, and then we'll be going into some new material. But the book of Revelation, the word means uncovering. And so it is supposed to uncover something for us so that we will know some things that are going to happen. Now, when we take a look at the book of Revelation, obviously, we understand that it is a book that the world is all excited about, especially in this age of which we're living. It is a period of time when everybody is preaching on it, that advertisements about come and hear the book of Revelation, see what's going to happen in the coming days, and everybody is excited because they're all built up, again, on the Jewish-Palestinian conflict that they have over there, and America trying to work out a peace settlement in this thing, and on it goes. Everybody is saying it's going to happen just any time. Now, it's all built, a whole theory, on Revelation, the 20th chapter. When you look at Revelation, the 20th chapter, we'll get over there after a while, why they build a whole philosophy on that. And it's a philosophy called premillennialism. And so the reason that I'm stopping to talk about this for a period of time is because when you're talking to anybody in the world and you mention the book of Revelation, it is just a foregone fact that it's talking about premillennialism. And everybody looks at it in that way. So we have to show either that is true or it is not true. Now, the fact of the case is, it is not true. But since it is not true, and everybody in the world thinks it is true, there's no need of me starting out in the book and starting about talking about how that this book is talking about the church and the Roman Empire and how the Caesars are trying to destroy the church of which it is talking about. It would be kind of like this. Suppose that I were to get up here, and suppose that I knew something, and I know that there's not going to be an election this year. The Democrats are not trying to pick a candidate. They're just out there and they're talking and so forth to try to get some kind of a leader in their party. But there's not going to be any election this year. George Bush will be president for another 4 years. Now, I know that is established fact. Now, what would you think if I get up and preach that? And I tell you that there's not going to be an election. So just trust me. Just trust me. I'm telling you there's not going to be an election. Let me tell you what's going to happen. Well, I know where you're going to be. Your mind is going to be back on this. Why would he say there's not going to be an election? Because everybody knows there is going to be an election. So if I had the facts that there's not going to be an election, I would have to spend the time showing that to you before you'd ever believe it. Nobody in their right mind would believe there's not going to be an election because we established that as a fact. Now, the same thing is true in the book of Revelation. The world knows, beyond any shadow of a doubt, there's going to be a millennial period. And so, unless you're showing that nobody's going to listen to you. So that's what I'm spending this time for. We're going to the Bible, and we're going to see that what the Bible teaches about this, so we can clear our mind of any kind of a millennial period that we've got, so we can see really what the Bible teaches about this. So now then, we're down to trying to get into the unveiling. Now, we need to understand the truth, and to do that, we need to remove the errors of premillennialism, the gap theory, and the postponement theory. These are terms that are used all the way through. You say, what does it mean? Well, we'll take a real quick look, and we'll look at it here. The doctrine of premillennialism really is based on this. The word pre means before. Millennium means 1,000 years. So this theory is that Jesus died on the cross, he went back to heaven, and now then, he's going to be coming back again, and this is going to be the next big event. He will come back, and once he gets back, he's coming back before anything else happens. That's the pre. And then once he gets back, he will set up his kingdom over in Jerusalem, and he will reign over there for 1,000 years. So premillennial means Jesus is coming back before he establishes his kingdom. Now tonight we're going to show that the kingdom is already in existence. We're going to show that the Bible teaches that beyond any shadow of a doubt. And so you say, well, if you show that, it will show that this is not true. And that really is true. Now, a brief overview of what we studied last week about this is that Jesus came, He died on the cross. Then He went back into heaven, and He is coming back again. Now, He's coming back before something happens. He's coming back before the rapture. Now, keep in mind, there's no biblical teaching on the rapture. That's a figment of the imagination. But they say, now there's going to be a rapture. The word rapture means snatched up. That people, the saints, only the saints, are going to be snatched up into the cloud, and they will be up there with the Lord for 7 years. Then, after that 7 years is done, they then will come back down, and all of this is based on a series of books called Left Behind. And it's talking about the people that are left behind when other people are snatched up. So it's all a fictitious section, but that is really where you get it. So then they say, now after the rapture, there's going to be the battle of Armageddon. Everybody in the world's heard of Armageddon, but very few people know what it really is. They say it's a worldwide battle. It is that apocalyptic battle that you see movies built on and so forth there. And so there's going to be a big battle in that. Now then, after that's over, then the saints will come back down out of the sky. They'll come back down, and the Lord then will establish His kingdom, and He will reign in Jerusalem for 1,000 years. So that is the theory. And the theory then is that we're ready just any time. The next big thing that's going to happen, see, the next big thing that's going to happen is this rapture. The saints will be snatched up. And that's where the movie is built on, snatching them out of airplanes, snatching them out of cars, snatching them out of bulldozers as they're working over in Seattle, and the bulldozer just keeps running into buildings and so forth. And all of the things that happen here in this life. So that's the big thing, is that big rapture. That's what everybody is looking for. And then finally, there'll be the establishment of the kingdom there. Now, that means back here, after Jesus went to heaven, He's up there, and of course He doesn't have His kingdom. We have to understand that. See, He went back up there. He doesn't have His kingdom because He's coming back to establish His kingdom. So what He did was He established His church. He just plugged His church in, and that's what's called the gap theory. There's a gap between the time the Lord came to establish His kingdom and when He comes back to actually do it. And so He filled in the gap with the church. That's the idea of where that's talking about. We'll see about postpone here in just a minute. Now, as we look at it, here's what it boils down to. That Christ failed to set up His kingdom as He intended to do because they say the Jews rejected Him. Then they say Christ set up His church instead of His kingdom just to fill in the gap. So that's what's called the church age. So when you hear people talking about the church age, you know it's identified with this particular doctrine right here. Then they say there is a difference between the church and the kingdom because the church is in existence now. It is just an afterthought in the mind of Christ. It is an emergency measure that He put in during this gap period. But the big important thing is when He comes back again and sets up His kingdom. So obviously, there's a vast difference between the kingdom and the church. Now, before I go any farther, you can see, hey, this really gets into some doctrinal problems when you start teaching that there is a difference between that. Well, that's true. That's the reason people think that in the church is not very important, but this over here is a really important thing. So everybody is looking for this over here. Now I'm going to ask a question, and this is where we start with our new material tonight. Does everyone agree that Christ came to set up His kingdom? Now I want you to think about that question. Does everyone? I'm talking about me and the premillennialist, and they're all divided on what they believe, but does everyone? And the answer to that is yes. It's amazing. Everyone. I don't know of anyone, never heard of anyone that doesn't say, Jesus came the first time in order to set up his kingdom. And we're going to see why, as we're going to study now in Daniel, the 2nd chapter. But now, he came to set up his kingdom, but he didn't set up his kingdom, see, according to this. He didn't do it. So now, let's take a look, and let's see what really happened here as we take a look at Daniel, the 2nd chapter. So, you can turn your Bibles over to Daniel, and I'm going to take just a little time tonight for us to go through this rather slowly so we can see the picture here. Now, the unusual thing is, everybody, to my knowledge, agrees with what I'm getting ready to say. I'm not going to be giving you anything that people disagree with, because it's just a historical fact. And everybody goes back and they see the historical fact, and everybody agrees, yeah, that's what it really is. So, let's go to the beginning of how this thing came to pass. Excuse me. Daniel, Meshach, and Abednego, they were taken over into Babylon when Nebuchadnezzar came over and took Judah into captivity. These three men, God blessed with a great amount of wisdom. And so they were put into the category of the wise men in Babylon. Now there was a category, just like our president has his cabinet. The Nebuchadnezzar, the ruler, would have his wise men. And what the wise men were would be men that he could call in, and they then were soothsayers. They were men that would be able to do whatever they did, the hocus pocus, and come up and tell them what the gods wanted them to do. Now, with all of this, with all these soothsayers, all of these frauds, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are put in this category because they are so wise. So one day, God had Nebuchadnezzar to have a dream. There's a lot of humor in this thing as you go through. Had him to have a dream. It really worried Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2 calls in his wise men. And he said, I had a dream, and I want to know what this dream means because I am really upset. And they said, okay, sir, tell us what the dream is, and we'll be happy to interpret it. Well, by this time, old Nebuchadnezzar has caught on to these guys, and he said, no. He said, I've forgotten what the dream is. He said, I've forgotten it, so you tell me what the dream is, and then you interpret it. And then they said, well, nobody can do that. And look down at verse 5. And the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. In other words, I can't remember it. If ye make not known unto me the dream and the interpretation thereof, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. So I can't remember it. Tell me what the dream is, tell me what it means, and if you don't, I'm going to cut you in little pieces and make a manure pile out of you, is what that word means. That'd be kind of scary. And I think you and I have learned a lot about Saddam Hussein. You see, Saddam is a dictator in the same land Nebuchadnezzar was. When you look at Saddam and you see what he did, how he treated his people, that had been going on for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. He has all power. He can do what he pleases. And we've seen some of the things he did, and we just stand aghast. Well, Nebuchadnezzar said, I'm going to take all the wise men in my cabinet here and cut you up in little pieces and put you out there unless you tell me that. Well, then they started out in there. He said, but if you'll show me what the dream is, the interpretation, I'll give you great honor and rewards and so forth. They answered a second time and said, let the king tell his servant the dream, and we will show the interpretation. And the king answered and said, I know of a certainty that you would gain time, because you see the thing is gone from me. But if you make not known unto me the dream, there is but one law for you. For you have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me the interpretation thereof. So it shows us Nebuchadnezzar says, if you can divine from the gods what the interpretation is, you can also ask them what the dream is. And they can tell you what the dream is. And so they came back and they answered there is not a man upon the earth that can show the king this matter. Well, the king then says, okay, you're going to be cut in pieces. So he's going to get rid of him. Well, you can imagine the hurry and the scurry that went on in that palace. And Daniel, Shadrach, and Meshach were not there. But they heard about all this because all this buddies of theirs, they're running around, they're getting ready to be killed. Everybody, Daniel, Meshach, and so forth, they'll also be killed. So they came and they asked their master, their ruler, they said, what's the problem? And so their ruler, Arioch, told them the story. The king is getting ready to kill all the wise men unless they interpret the dream, and nobody can interpret the dream. So Daniel then says, okay, he said, hold off the killing, and I will interpret the dream for you. And so he gets the other three guys together. They prayed to God, and God revealed the dream to Daniel. So he told him what the dream was. He told him what the interpretation was. So then Daniel comes and says, go tell the king to get me an appointment immediately before the killing starts. So he runs in. They say, hey, there's a wise man out here that said he can interpret the dream. So Daniel comes in, and the king's impressed with him. But Daniel then goes to quite a length to tell him, I want you to know I cannot interpret this dream by any great wisdom I have above any other man. But my God has revealed to me. My God can do this. And so he's making sure that Nebuchadnezzar understands that his God is the one that is there. Look at verse 28. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and hath made known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Now, he's going to tell you what's going to happen here in these latter days. So, he goes on. He said, I don't have any wisdom in there. But now then look in verse 31. Verse 31, he says, Thou, O king, sawest, and behold a great image. So I've just made a big image up there. This image was mighty, and whose brightness was excellent, and stood before thee, and the aspect thereof was terrible. And as for this image, its head was of gold. So, all of a sudden this image has a gold head in here. And it says, not only have a gold head, its breast and its arms of silver, and its belly and its thighs of brass, its legs and of iron, and its feet part of iron and part of clay. So he said, now that's what you saw. Now not only did you see that, but you also saw up here on a hill that there was a little rock that was cut out without any hands. It was just cut out. And it rolled down, and it hit that big statue right in the feet and broke it all to pieces. Just churned it up into dust. Said, that is what you saw. So now think about Nebuchadnezzar. If you'd have dreamed that, and the guy comes in and tells you in detail what you've dreamed, you're not going to have any question about whether he can interpret this dream or not. So he goes on here, and he tells him that you saw this stone up there that was cut out. Then the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, the gold, broke it in pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floor, and the wind carried them away, so that no place was found for them, and the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. So it's kind of interesting. Now this stone that came down here, it hit this, it crushed all of these things into fine dust, and a wind just blew all that dust away. And there's nothing left of this statue that's right here. But this stone, it just kept growing. It just grew and grew and grew and grew and grew, and finally the stone filled the whole earth. I said, that's the vision that you saw. Now in verse 36, this is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art King of kings, unto whom the God of heaven hath given the kingdom, and the power, and the strength, and the glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the fields and the birds of the heavens hath he given unto thy hand, and hath made thee to rule over all of them. Thou art the head of gold. So, no question about it. Nebuchadnezzar, you're the head of gold. You are Babylon. You're over Babylon, and that head, you represent that head as the king of Babylon. So he tells him that. Then he says, and he gets now then pretty quickly in here, in verse 40, in verse 39, and after thee there shall arise a kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall rule over the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, forasmuch as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things, and as iron it crusheth all these, shall it break in pieces and crush. So now, he said, I want you to know, in here, there's going to be another kingdom that's inferior to you, just like silver is inferior to gold. Then there's going to be another kingdom that's inferior to that one. Then there's going to be another kingdom that is made of iron and clay. Now, I put these kingdoms up there. The second one is the Medo-Persians, the third one is the Grecian, and the fourth one is Rome. And you say, how do you know that? Suppose that I were to tell you that we start out with President Bush, number 1. And after President Bush 1, there will be another president arise. And after him, there will be another president arise. And while this president is ruling, there will be a war in Iraq. Well, you could go back, you could say, I know exactly what Lowell's talking about. History shows the president came after the President Bush, and then his son came after this one. That's the way with this. No question about it. Everybody knows it. The Medo-Persians, they combined their army, and they went against Nebuchadnezzar, and they conquered Nebuchadnezzar. Then the Grecians, now this would be Alexander the Great, he then got his army together, and he came over, and he conquered the Medo-Persians. And then the Romans got their army together, and they conquered the Greeks. And so the Rome then was the last of these world empires that you have. Everybody understands that. Now, all of these empires are going to be crumbling down. But let's look just a little bit more at this Rome down here. It's going to have these legs of iron. It's going to crush things. That's what he says. These legs of Rome, and he's starting to picture a bad picture. And I want you to see that, because later on we'll see it a little bit more in here. So, 39, it shall break in pieces and crush. And whereas thou saw the feet and the toes and part of potter's clay and part of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom. But there shall be in it of the strength of iron, forasmuch as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron, part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not clave one to another, even as iron doth not mingle with clay. Now he said, I'll tell you something else about this fourth kingdom. This fourth kingdom down here is going to be kind of a unique kingdom. It's going to be a mean, vicious kingdom. It's going to be a kingdom that crushes people. But it's going to be a kingdom that is made of iron that crushes, mixed with clay, and that makes weakness. And so when this rock hits it, this nation is not going to be strong enough to last. That rock is just going to break it apart, because iron and clay do not mix. Now, he says, what I'm talking about here is people. The Roman Empire will be a conglomeration of people, different people. It won't be just one great big Roman army, but they're going to amalgamate all these nations in this thing, and they're even going to leave every religion to have its own head and its own religion, its own temple, And so the Jews were left there to be a part of this. And so this nation will never be a united nation. So it will be able to be destroyed one day. Now, what is this rock? What is this stone? And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, nor shall the sovereignty thereof be left to another people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Now, here it is. We look at this kingdom here then, 244. He's going to set up this, and it shall never be destroyed. This kingdom is going to hit this big thing, and it's going to crumble. Now, notice, it's going to hit it in the feet. It's not going to hit it anywhere else. It's going to hit it in the feet. Now, the feet and the legs stand for Rome. So this stone is going to be cut out when Rome is ruling. And when Rome falls, this whole series is going to be done away. You say, how could that be? Well, when the Medo-Persians came and they captured Babylon, what nation did they have then? They changed the name, like a company does on stationery. They changed the name. They quit calling it Babylon and they called it Medo-Persian. But who were the people? It was the people that was in Babylon. And then finally, Alexander the Great came and he conquered them. Who did he conquer? He conquered the nation, the same nation that the Medo-Persians was over, and they're over the same ones that Babylon was over. And then finally Rome came and Rome conquered. Who did Rome conquer? And finally, when Rome is destroyed, this whole thing is just blown away. So there's nothing left of any of them that are there. Now, the stone is going to hit during the days of the Roman government. So let's look in 45. Forasmuch as thou sawest that a stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. So Daniel said, this will happen this way. Now, let's take what we know now and put it over against what we hear in this premillennial idea. That Jesus came and he didn't set up his kingdom, and the kingdom's not going to be set up until future years, but Rome was destroyed. How can that be? See? How can that be? Daniel said, it's certain. And all of these people will tell you, yep, that's what Daniel said. What Lowell is telling you is true. Nobody will disagree with that. But they have an explanation of why all these things happen here. So, as we look at it, Daniel and Jesus taught both the same thing. Here it is, you have this statue over here. Daniel 2 says, in the days of Rome, during the Roman rule, the kingdom would be established. Now, when Jesus came, what did he say in all of these verses? What was his sermon over and over and over again? He and John the Baptist, repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Who was ruling when Jesus came? Now, Rome really started ruling in 24 BC. And so Rome was ruling the world just as it started. It's going to rule until about 324 AD there. But here it is. It started right here. Now, Jesus and Daniel taught the same thing. Daniel says it's going to be in the days of the Roman government. Jesus says, I'm here, and the kingdom is getting ready to be established here. So, how do they explain Jesus not doing what he and Daniel both said they would do? What is the explanation? Well, here's the explanation. They say that Jesus intended to set up his kingdom when he came. Everybody agrees with that. But the Jews rejected him, and he was unable to do it. So he wanted to do it, but the Jews rejected him and killed him, so he was unable to do it. So what did he do? He postponed it. He just postponed it until a later date. Now you see, we've talked about premillennial, we've talked about the gap theory, and we've talked about the postponement theory. It's called all of this. So he just postponed it until down there a little bit later on. During this postponed period, what did he do? He put in a church then. Before he went back to heaven, then he said, okay, I'll go back, I'll postpone it, I'll come back later, set up a kingdom, and so he set up the church age. Now, this might sound good, except in John 6, verse 15, it says, the Jews, therefore, tried to take him by force and make him become a king. Did the Jews reject him? There's the time Jesus could have set up his kingdom. They tried to kidnap him. They tried to force him to become a king. When he's going down the hill, those of you in Wednesday night class, as he's going down the hill into Jerusalem, everybody yelling about the king is coming. The kingdom is coming. They're all excited over the kingdom and the king. They didn't reject him. He had Jews that were ready to do it. But even if all the Jews in the world rejected him, and he came to set up a kingdom, couldn't he have done it? Couldn't he have done it had he been divine? Well, this is the explanation, that he intended to, he wanted to, that was his purpose, but he had to postpone it because the Jews rejected him. So as we look at this then, we start putting it together, we start seeing just a little bit more here in this whole picture. Daniel 2 shows us this. But not only does Daniel 2 show us this, but now Daniel 7 tells us something. What does Daniel 7 tell us? Okay, first of all, look at Daniel 2. Daniel 2 gives us a time period. What's the time period? In the days of the Roman government. That could be anywhere from 24 BC to 324 AD. There's over a 300-year period of time that would be in there. But now, let's go to Daniel 7, and Daniel 7 now is going to pinpoint it and tell you exactly what time in that period of Roman domination that the Lord got his kingdom. In Romans the 13th chapter, we're going to see that he got it when he went back up to the Ancient of Days. When he ascended back up, it was given him a kingdom. That's when the kingdom was given to him. So let's flip over there. Now, for those of you who read chapter 7, you started out and you read about these grotesque beasts, these horrible beasts. Now, let me tell you now, these beasts they are exact parallel to that statue that's back there, to the four kingdoms. And we're going to get back into that at the appropriate time. But that's what all of that is about. We'll be back in chapter 7 here kind of frequently. I want you to notice, though, as we look at it right here, as we start in verse 13, I'm just going to get right to the point. And I saw in the night visions, that is, he was having a vision from God, and there came with the clouds of heaven one like unto a son of man, and he came even to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Now, but stop and put that picture in your mind. Daniel here is he's telling about over 500 years before it happened, that he said, I saw this cloud of heaven, and I saw one like the Son of Man go up in this cloud, and he went up to the Ancient of Days. That's God. He went up to God. Now, when he went up to God, then they brought him before God. That is an explanation of the ascension, isn't it? In other words, he ascended back up into heaven. Now, look what happens. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. So Daniel 13 then says, Jesus is going to be giving his kingdom when he goes back and ascends back up to the Father. that's when he'll be given that kingdom. Now, all we got to do is study the book of Acts. What happened? He went out on Mount Olivet, caught up into a cloud. The cloud took him out of their sight. Then what happens in Acts 2? Here it is, he sends the Holy Spirit and establishes his kingdom. Just exactly the way that Daniel said that he would do. So Daniel 2, Daniel 13 establishes that particular point right there. Here's the truth of the matter. You take the ascension, it comes up there, let's put an X up there, that's the time he ascended, went up to God. Now he began setting at that point. Now it says he must sit there until all enemies are under his feet. I want all of you to turn over to Acts 2. We've talked about Acts 1, Acts 2. Turn over to Acts 2, where it talks about him ascending up here into heaven here. He went up there. And we're going down to verse 34. It said, "For David ascended not into the heavens, but he saith himself, The Lord," now that's God, "said unto my Lord," that's the Messiah, "Set thou on my right hand." Now, for right now, I just want you to picture him sitting there. Sitting there. Whatever that means. Whatever that means. If President Bush called Ryan, the White House, he goes up there and President Bush says, "Ryan, your job is, I want you to sit on my right hand." Well, he'd pull up a chair, and there he is. We wouldn't know what Ryan's doing, but we would know it's pretty important, wouldn't we? I'd be impressed. I'd start calling him sir. Treat him a little differently. We'd know it's really important, but I don't know what I don't know what Ryan is doing, but I know he's sitting there. He's fulfilling some kind of a duty. Now, he said, "Set thou on my right hand until I make thine enemies the footstool of thy feet." Now, how long is Jesus going to sit at God's right hand? Until he makes all of his enemies the footstool of his feet. So I know that, see? I know when that's going to come to an end. Now, you say, okay, what does that prove? Okay, let's put it together with 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 25. And here we have the Apostle Paul saying, then, about him, about Jesus, of what he must do. I'm going to flip over there and we'll take a peek at it in this way. Okay, down here I'm going to start in verse 24. "Then cometh the end, when he shall deliver up the kingdom to God." I'm going to come back to this for just a minute, but remember, what did Paul say Jesus is going to do when the end comes? Then cometh the end, when, what is he going to do? Is he going to bring the kingdom down to earth? Or is he going to deliver it up to God? See? So then cometh the end, when he shall deliver the kingdom, then up to God here, even the Father, when he shall have abolished all rule and all authority and power. Hey, wait a minute. When's he going to take that kingdom back? When he's abolished all rule, authority, and power. When he's got rid of all those enemies. Now listen. "For he must reign till he hath put all enemies under his feet." So here we go. What's he doing while he's sitting there? What did Paul say he's doing while he's sitting at the right hand of God? "For he must reign till he's put all enemies under his feet." That's what he's doing. He's sitting there and he's reigning. Who reigns? King, isn't it? Who's he reign over? It's kingdom, isn't it? Right? Now it says, "The last enemy that shall be abolished is death." So that gives us a little more information. Jesus is sitting there at God's right hand. He's reigning over his kingdom, and he's going to reign there until the last enemy is abolished, and the last enemy is going to be death. Well, how does he abolish death? How do you go about abolishing death? Because there's billions of people that have already died and they're in the grave. The only way you can abolish death is by resurrection. That's what this whole chapter is about. He's going to resurrect people. When Jesus Christ comes back and He resurrects everybody out of the grave, there will be no such thing as death. If you and I were walking around a week after He comes back, of which we won't be because the world won't be here, but if we were walking around and somebody said, "What are all these stones out here?" "Oh, that used to be where people were buried. That's where, that used to mark it. You see this one over here? That was Lowell's. That's where he was when he was dead." Well, where's Lowell now? He's raised. He's not dead anymore. There's no such thing as death. Resurrection turns that death upside down. Now then, as we look at this then, we see, as we put it all together, in here, He's at God's right hand, sitting there until His enemy is a footstool of His feet. Then cometh the end, when He shall deliver up the kingdom to God. I want us to notice this. The millennial theory says, then cometh the end, when He brings the kingdom down. No, then cometh the end, when He takes the kingdom back up to God. The verses right here tell us again what He's doing in all of this. He must reign until all of these things happen then, as we've got there. Now, I want you to notice what the millennial theory contradicts. Going to be a resurrection, but what it contradicts then in all of this is, marks that out. That's not true. That's not true. He's not going to deliver the kingdom up. He's going to bring the kingdom down. That's not true. Over there, delivering it up. See, it's just the opposite. He's going to be bringing it down. Then this is not true. He's not reigning because He doesn't have a kingdom. He won't have a kingdom until He comes back again. See? And then this is not true. There'll still be the death that is over there. So now, my time is up. This is where we're going to have one more lesson on showing many, many prophecies. I'm going to go through several passages of Scripture that show a contradiction between this millennial theory and the Bible teaching. And what I want you to see is this. The Bible teaches as plainly as anything can be taught. The Old Testament prophesied, the New Testament teaches that the kingdom was established in Acts the 2nd chapter and is in existence right now. And when the Lord comes back again, He's not coming back to rapture. He's not coming back to set up a kingdom. He's coming back to where we then will go spend an eternity, and the judgment day will be at that time. So I want to dispense with this so then we can start with the book of Revelation and say, okay, now then, all of these things we can see is not true. Now, what is the truth? What really does the Bible teach? Okay, tonight we will close our class period and let us stand and sing one song, and after that we will have the Lord's